exceedingly small sample of blood. She was a young, charismatic leader and attracted millions and millions of dollars of investments from multiple different sectors. And it came out over time that Theranos' medical technology didn't work. And they kept receiving money from investors even though they had strong evidence, at least, that their technology didn't work. It wasn't going to be able to deliver. This was the subject recently of a Hulu series called The Dropout, which I was just getting confused with the book named Bad Blood, so Anne had to correct me. It is The Dropout, right? Because I almost said something else. I got it. It's correct. It's called The Dropout. Elizabeth Holmes was convicted of 4 counts of felony federal fraud charges this past January, and has been in the news again this past week because she's going to be sentenced by the judge. Her defense lawyers have sent a number of updates to the judge saying, will you please be lenient? The cases against her, the 4 counts that she's been convicted of, each carry a maximum sentence of 20 years. So she could be sentenced to a maximum of 80 years in prison for the amount, millions and millions of dollars that she defrauded from people. And in this context, her defense lawyers have asked for the judge to just sentence her to 18 months of house arrest. That's what they've asked for. And among the documents that they've sent to argue for this is one statement from one of those documents. Her lawyers argue this. The defendant has no criminal history, has a perfect pretrial services compliance record, and is described by the people who know her repeatedly as a gentle and loving person who tries to do the right thing. As a gentle, loving person who tries to do the right thing. I want to zero in on this last line here. And actually, as I do that, I'm actually not trying to pass judgments on anyone in the situation or parties. I don't know what it was like to be under those pressures. Somebody with more information can pass judgment on that. But I think it's interesting that the lawyers are arguing, right, that there are people who know this individual, and they describe her repeatedly as a gentle, loving person who tries to do the right thing. In other words, the things that happen in the context of the case are different from the person that she actually is. The people who know her and know her moral character know that she's trying to do the right thing. In other words, that there's a distinction between the things that are being adjudicated in the case and the goodness of this person. But this person actually is basically a good person. And I want to ask this question, why does this line of argument fly in our society? Why does this even pass as a reasonable thing to say in this society? Because while we're engaging with this statement, we might go, I don't know, that seems a little, who knows? Who knows what we're thinking as we read that? The very idea, right, that someone can sort of make mistakes, but that we would still say of them, they're a good person. They messed up, but they're still a good person. They're a loving person. They're trying to do the right thing. That actually, as a line of thinking, is very natural to us. Other cultures and societies might say, you messed up really bad, you're bad. And this line of argument wouldn't even make sense in that cultural or societal or moral landscape. Why does it make sense to us here to say, people make mistakes, but they're still basically good? I want to argue in this moment that that line of argument makes sense in our world, in our society, because we need it to make sense. We need to be able to say of ourselves, I'm good. And yet, just like anyone who's on trial for anything that they may or may not have done, we have a whole list of things in our lives that testify to an opposite reality. We have a whole list of things in our lives that testify that we might be, at best, morally ambiguous. At worst, we might have some pretty serious moral and character deficiencies that show up in our lives over and over again. But there's something inside of us, isn't there, that needs to be able to say, I'm really basically a good person. I'm really, and not just that we're good, but that, like, the moral dimensions of our lives that make us able to say that we're good also enable us to say that my life is meaningful, that my life matters, that I've done something important or significant or noteworthy in my life. There's something in us, isn't there, that needs to be able to say of ourselves, I still basically matter. I'm basically good and worthwhile, even you're good. Why do we need to hear that? These are the questions we're going to be asking today. We're walking through a sermon series, an exegetical sermon series in the book of Galatians. We've just been walking through the text verse by verse. It's been really wonderful. We're going to be in Galatians chapter 6, verses 6 through 10 today. And to set the context a little bit, Paul is writing a letter to first century Christians in the Roman province of Galatia, and these Christians have come under a teaching that is telling them that they need to get a bunch of things right in order to be right with God. And so Paul's been telling them the whole letter that actually is antithetical to the gospel of the good news of the grace of Jesus coming to us in the power of the Spirit that tells us actually reach outside of yourself into the things of God and don't be worried about getting everything right in here in order to be right with God and other people. And yet at the end of the letter, Paul's addressing a handful of lingering questions that could come from that teaching. Like the question he's addressing today. If I don't have to get everything right in my life in order to become right with God and other people, does that mean I don't have to be good at all? Whence is the question of goodness and doing good things in my life for God or for other people, if there isn't any law that I have to be laboring under anymore? Do I still need to be good? I feel like I do. Paul's addressing these questions in this closing chapter. Again, our text is from Galatians chapter 6, verses 6 to 10. I'll read the text aloud. One who is taught the word must share all good things with the one who teaches. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, especially to those who are of the household of faith. We are both good and not good. At the same time, we are both good and not good. Paul is hinting at that here in Galatians chapter 6, verse 6, where he says, one who is taught the word must share in all good things with the one who teaches. The idea here is that Paul is saying that when you receive something, when you receive the word, we could extrapolate here and say, receiving the truth of the gospel, the context of Galatians, we then are put into a position where we participate in good things in relationship to the truth in other people. We share in goodness, in good things, Paul says, as we are in relationship to other people and to the truth in a prior sense. And that means that while we can be good and participate in what's good, it's not inherently in here all the time. It's something that we participate in that is somehow in some significant way external to us. This view of goodness is derived ultimately from one of the most foundational passages in the Scripture, the creation account in Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 recounts the creation of the world and reality, and when we think about the creation account in Genesis, we often think about the way in which Genesis reflects to us a story of material creation. But what we miss often when we read the Genesis account is that there are profoundly important immaterial aspects of reality that are present in creation because the God of the Bible created reality. Let's look at one quick passage of this from Genesis chapter 1. This is, I think, Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 to 5, and then a summative verse in verse 31. The text says this, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day, skipping ahead. And God saw everything that he has made, and behold, it was very good. I want to point out here these elements that we often miss when we're looking at Genesis chapter 1. First of all, there's not just material reality present in creation. There's immaterial reality. Moral reality is present at creation. God sees creation and doesn't just see matter. He sees a moral dimension. He sees goodness. He sees something that's meaningful, that matters, something that has a strong evaluation, the way that we think about it in the world. He doesn't just see time plus matter plus chance. He sees goodness. He sees value. And the Bible says that those things are present at creation. They're imbued into creation because the God of the Bible is the God that made this reality. What this means is that we, as the objects of creation ourselves, that we're good, but that also lives in us and in relationship to us in some way that's also external to us at the same time. Right? The text says God saw creation and saw that it was good. Creation is not doing something to manufacture goodness. It's just in creation because God sees it there. And that both means for us, as people who are created by God, as objects of God's creation, that we are good, but it doesn't just live in here on its own. It lives in relationship to God. Our goodness and our sense of being good both lives in us as something we personally know and experience, but it becomes real and actualized as we're in relationship to a God that's external from us that says, yes, you are good. My whole creation is good. Jesus thinks about goodness in the same way. In Luke chapter 18, verse 19, someone comes up to Jesus and is like, hey, good teacher. And before he can even get the question out, Jesus stops him with these words. Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. Why Jesus isn't even being comfortable in a surface way with being called good. Jesus, let me say it again. Jesus, in even a surface way, isn't comfortable with being called good. Jesus says, whenever we talk about good, we should be talking about it in reference to God. God is good. God is the only one who is good. Now, this doesn't mean, I want to clarify, that, in sort of a religious reductionism that sometimes enters in this conversation, that people who don't know God can't be good or can't do good things. So I'm not saying that we need to know God or have faith in order to do something good. I'm saying that the idea of what it means to be good and the ability to look at the world and our own lives and see them as having a moral dimension, as having something that we would talk about as goodness, as meaningful, as valuable. The Bible says that shows up because of the God of the Bible and the way that the God of the Bible has created things. On the one hand, we acknowledge this in our own lives, and we acknowledge it implicitly all the time. Because as we're going out and around in the world, we experience the moral dimension of our existence. We wake up to the fact that we think that certain things are meaningful and valuable. Sometimes they surprise us, and sometimes we're torn by that experience. I was walking into the basement of my building the other day to put some stuff in the trash, and I heard this sort of sweeping sound. And I said, what is that? Is it the pipe? Blah, blah, blah. And I looked over my shoulder, and there was a glue trap that the exterminators of the building had put on the table in the corner. And I looked down, and there's this adorable little mouse in there. And he's just squeaking away. Oh, God. I don't know what your reaction to that sort of situation is, but I'm like profoundly torn. I'm like, how do I free a mouse from a glue trap? How do I get back to this family? Where's the mouse social that I can post to? I found a friend. I'm just like, I'm waking up to that experience. Like there's something in that experience there that my moral dimension wakes up to and goes, oh, something valuable is happening. And at the same time, I'm like, you harbinger of disease. Oh, God. If you were a cockroach, you'd have nothing that I could anthropomorphize to you, Come on! Maybe you don't feel the same sort of tension with the mouse in the glue trap, but you have something else, where the moral dimensions of your life, you wake up to it and you go, something meaningful and valuable is happening there, and I just recognize it as it is. And when we recognize that in our own lives and in the world, we're recognizing the way in which God has imbued reality with not just material reality, but immaterial reality. And in particular, the ability to look at the world and go, that matters. That's meaningful, that's valuable, that's good. And so in that sense, we're like, yeah, amazing. Tell me more. And in another sense, we struggle. Because we struggle with the idea that we just can't account for good or what's meaningful or what's valuable solely on our own. Humans, over and over again, this story is told in the Bible time and time again, we want to be able to evaluate things as valuable or meaningful or moral apart from any other efforts. We want to be wise in our own eyes. We want to do what we think is right. We want to be our own judges. This is, in essence, what happens in the Genesis account, by the way, when Adam and Eve, they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? It's a profound and difficult passage to interpret, but at least one thing that's going on there is they're eating from this tree that's going to make them, they think, able to assess the world morally apart from God. They'll have the knowledge of good and evil on their own. They think that that's going to make them like God. We do this all the time. We rebel at the idea that we need to have something external to us that helps us see what's good and meaningful and valuable in our own lives. And this puts us in a profound challenge, because as we do that, as we reject God, reject something external, reject even just the basic things of the Spirit, hope, faith, love, things that are outside of ourselves that help us see the world in our lives as things that are meaningful, we become unable over time to sustain our moral energy on our own. We become unable to evaluate things in the world and in our own lives in a way, first of all, that's consistent and reliable, but also in a way that continues over time. We are unable to sustain our own need to be good on our own. Without God, we're unable to sustain our own need to be good. This is what Paul is saying to the Galatians in verses 7 and 8, and there's another point here in verse 9. He says, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption." Without God in the pursuit of what's good and meaningful and what matters, we just sow the flesh and hope to reap the things of the Spirit. We just sow our own efforts and our own best ideas of how to produce things that are good in our own lives. And it's shocker, Paul says, all we actually reap when we do that is the corruption of the things that are in that soil. He's not even saying that they're bad. He's just saying that they're corrupted. They don't last. They fall apart over time. This leads us to do things in our own lives where we try to produce some sort of good in our own life, and we need it so badly, and aren't able just to rest in God's own evaluation of us, that we then grasp for things from the flesh, things like our own striving, things like habits of behavior that we know are unhealthy and not good for us, things like anger, to manufacture some good that we think we need to be produced in our own lives. We need so badly to see something grow up in our life where we go, good job, that was valuable. And so we find ourselves in our careers engaging with our coworkers as people that we're in competition with. Right? People that we need to step on and we get one more up because we don't feel like anyone has said good job to us yet in a way that satisfies us. And so instead of showing up with the people that we work with, being full of the things of the Spirit, we show up full of our own fleshly working to step over one more person so that someone goes, good job. Or we need to feel good. We need someone to ask us how you're doing, and we actually honestly say, I'm doing good. We need so badly to be able to say that, to believe that. And so we grab some addictive pattern of behavior that we think is going to manufacture that feeling in us. And we grab the things of the flesh to produce the things that we think are going to make good things show up in our lives. God comes to us and is like, I already see the goodness in your life. Just receive that from me. But we're like, no. I need to do it myself. I need to see it myself. I need to create it myself. And so I'm going to grab and pledge in all these things to try to manufacture the good in my own life. And the problem with this is that this creates a vacuousness inside of ourselves. Not just personally, but arguably societally as well. It creates this gaping, gnawing space inside, where no matter how many good things we produce in our lives, it never fills up that gaping maw that's open in our souls, that is just waiting to bite down on one new manufactured good thing in our life. It just never, ever, ever fills it up. And so we keep going around, and then we get stuck in this really deceptive thought pattern that's like, well, that's just because you didn't feed it with a good enough thing. And we spend our whole lives reaching for the thing that we think is going to be good enough, or valuable enough, or meaningful enough to speak to us that thing that we're longing to hear. You're good. Good job. You've done a good job. And we just feed it and feed it and feed it with this vacuousness cannot be filled by the things of the flesh. This can happen societally as well, where society has strong moral feeling, strong, to support its moral norms if they don't have any life-giving moral wells to draw from anymore? Well, society's turned to coercive power. Let's coerce people into doing the right thing. Into this challenge, this societal challenge, Paul, right at the end of the text, is like, hey, do good stuff, and especially for the household of faith. We look at that person and we're like, I don't know, Paul, are you some homer jerk, or like, do good things for people who go to church or whatever? Society needs people so badly who are doing good things and working for good things out from faith in the Spirit and not out from the flesh. It is a huge gift to society when people of faith show up and say, I'm going to do good, not because I'm striving out for something of myself, and not because I'm going to reach for power to get my way or make people see things the way I do, but when people of faith show up and say, out from the freedom and overflow of faith, I'm going to work for what's good, out from a place that leads me to avoid coercive power. And it makes me able to do this for other people, because I don't necessarily need to see it come to fruition in my own time. I will sow in faith. And so Paul says, do good for those people. Do good for the household of faith. The people who are working in the world to bring about good things without thought to themselves, without a need for it to speak any verdict over themselves. Those people are on a long and lonely road. Do good for them when you see that. As we're in this place, trying to create good things in our lives, trying to manufacture the verdict of I'm good by working out the things of the flesh, we become exhausted. We're just not able to keep that up over time. Paul is alluding at this reality when he says, and let us not grow weary of doing good. Paul's like, trying to do good over and over again is really tiring. It's really hard. It's super exhausting for many, many reasons. Paul says we shouldn't grow weary in doing good because he says if we're able to continue, somehow we will reap a harvest. He says this in verse 9, for in due season we will reap if we don't give up. And I just want to clarify the power of this seasonal metaphor. Paul is in a sense saying, in this world, goodness has a season. In the same way that certain trees have seasons for the fruit that they bear, Paul says there are times in this world where goodness is in season. And if we sow it, we know at some point it's going to bear fruit. The challenge, of course, is we don't know when that season is. The Greek here for season is translated due time. It's kairos. It's not chronological time. It's profound, momentous arrival time. Paul says goodness has a time. Goodness has a moment. Just like the excitement when you see a fruit coming out for the first time on a tree. My wife and I have a dwarf citrus plant in our south-facing window. It's a calamondric orange tree. And when we got in there, someone saw it and they're like, oh my gosh, that's supposed to be like in Sicily. And also, your light is fine, but it's not great. You're never going to get any fruit on that. And by God, when that first fruit began to grow, it was the time for calamondric oranges. And you know what? They're so small, and they don't taste like oranges. They taste like limes. They're basically good for nothing. Except for the spiritual and moral significance of the natural world reflecting to us that there is a time for the things that are immaterial. And they will grow. They're coming. They're coming. There is a time for them. And Paul says we will see that time and see that harvest if we don't give up. But this whole manufacture the good out of my own efforts thing, it's exhausting. We give up all the time. We just can't sustain it. We cannot sustain the moral energy that it takes because not every good thing grows in the same season. Some good things we sow in our lives and we're like, I should see a return in 2 to 3 weeks. Some good things we sow in our lives and we're like, 12 to 18 months. Some good things we sow in our lives, and we have no idea when the harvest is coming. And some people might say there might not be a harvest coming. And we might say that too if we didn't have the hope of the faith of the good gardener of the God of the Bible who brings all good things to fruition. All good things to fruition. We just can't sustain that hope and that energy through our own best efforts. And so not only then do we just give up and we don't see the harvest of things that we would actually want to see, but then we feel doubly bad and condemned for having given up in the first place. And now we're just stuck in the guilt and shame of having given up on something in our lives. And that becomes something really difficult and hard to get out of. And this is the way that it is in our world, because we live in a world where goodness is in season sometimes, but not all the time. And so we give our best efforts, we church something out, we're just longing to hear that voice that says, you're good, you can feel good now. You can feel good about yourself. You can describe yourself as good. You can hear someone say, you've done a good job. Whatever else happens in your life, well done, good. You've been called and said good. And we strive for that, and we grind it out, and when we fail, we feel bad. A double failure, because the good just isn't reliably harvested in our world. It's not always the season for good things in our lives in this world. And doubly condemned because we feel bad. We feel terrible. We've given up. And so we just have it's all that much more likely that we're never going to see the harvest that we want. Either because it's just not the season for goodness, or because we've given up and we're not proud of it. That's what we have in this world in our pursuit of things that are good and meaningful and valuable. But if that's true, why are we so insistent on hoping for that next moment in our lives or in our world or in our society when it's finally the season for goodness? Isn't that hope, that impulse, that instinct so hard to kill? In my life, things are going bad, I'm struggling with this, I'm having my job, whatever it is that we're going through, and yet all of that evidence is not enough to stop some voice from speaking to us internally. It's about to be the season for good things in your life again. The Bible says that we can't crush that hope, because there is a world where goodness is always in season. Not just where we have the power to pursue good things without stopping, but a world where goodness is always in season. Where even the smallest seeds of goodness that are planted through the thinnest thread of shaky hope, God, they grow. Because it's always time in the world of God to harvest the good. God has made a world where goodness is being harvested all the time. This world that we live in, it's not real. Goodness was never meant to be a seasonal crop. There's a world of God where goodness is in season all the time. Where it's God's good hands in the dirt of the world to produce something that's good and meaningful and valuable and something that matters in our lives all the time, to the most small and insignificant deposit, because that is how God has created the world to be. And you know it. You know it. Deep down you know it. And that's why you always have hope for the next season in this world when goodness is in season, because we long to be back at home in the world where our soul knows that goodness is always right. It's like that in the world of God. And we can't forget it, because that's where we came from, and God wants to bring us back. God brings us back through Jesus, the one who now in this world, in this time, is a harbinger of the world where goodness is evergreen and speaks to you now the thing that your soul longs to hear. You are good. Not because you manufactured it on your own, but because God brought it up in your life. out of whatever small faithfulness as you had to sow, God saw them and grew them and saw them as good. This is what Jesus says is awaiting his followers and even now animates their pursuit of the good. In Matthew chapter 25, verse 23. Speaking of the faithful servant entering into the house of his master, Jesus says, his master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's joy." Come and share his joy, his laughter, his song. Come and share in those things, because that thing that your soul is longing to hear, someone who looks at you and says, "Good," it's spoken to you again through Jesus. The one who at the cross took a tree of suffering and made it a tree that bears the fruits and flowering of goodness in a way that is evergreen. People who have received this are then able to sow goodness in their own lives and in the lives of others and in society. This is what Paul says at the second half of verse 8, "But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life." But it's important to recognize it's a sowing of the Spirit. Not all of our efforts to manufacture this verdict of good in our own lives, the sowing of the flesh, it's a sowing of the things that are beyond us, receiving them from God. And as we sow those things, goodness grows up in our lives and in the world. Paul says that for people who have received that, who live that, we don't just stop and say, "Oh, well, God gave me the grace of letting me know that I'm good, so I'm done." Paul says those people now have their own time, their own moment to assess in their own lives and saying, just like in the world of God, where goodness is evergreen, what season is God raising up in my own life where I can faithfully sow the Spirit such that goodness will grow up? And in verse 10, Paul says, "So then, as we have opportunity," it's the same word there, kairos, as the word for the goodness being in season in verse 9. Paul says, "So then, for everyone who's in this place, what is in season in your own life? What opportunity do you have? What time and moment has been given to you?" You know, we don't choose the circumstances of our life. We don't choose the circumstances we're born into. We don't choose the people that we know or we're shaped by. We don't choose so many of the things that went well and so many of the things that were hard. There's so many things about our life that we can't choose. But God says somewhere, somehow, in the grace and providence of God, at the intersection of all the things we didn't choose and all the things that God has poured into us that make us who we are, our giftings, our passions, our personality, the strengths that we have, the weaknesses that we have, at the intersection of that, God says, Paul says, there's something, some harvest of goodness that it is in season in your own life. There's a moment that's present at the intersections of those things where you are now in your own life that it can grow if we sow it in faith. Paul says, what are you going to do with your time? What are you going to do? The intersection that you live at right now is an intersection that no one else in the history of reality has ever lived at in the way that you're at.